Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Well, welcome again. And, so we have our speaker today is Bill Weber. He has been a, sorry, I should probably, if you want to do your names. Right. Sorry. What we usually do at this point is go around and say our names, and we usually have a way that we do it, but Bill has an idea about it today, so I'll let him do that.
I'm taking over the names. Should I start?
Please.
This is Mother's Day today, so as we go around and say our names, I'd like to ask people if they would feel so inclined to not only clearly state your own name, but say either my mother's name is or my mother's name was, and let's invite our mothers into the group and also get a sense of whose mothers are with us and whose mothers are maybe not quite so with us. So my name is Bill Weber, and my mother is Pat Ann.
My name is Eric. My mother is Pauline.
My name is Rich. My mother is Claire.
I'm Kay, and my mother's name was Sitsko.
Oh, my name is Michael. My mother's name was Anne.
My name is Michael. My mother's name was Mildred.
My name is Joe, and my mother's name was Rita.
My name is Michael, and my mother's name is Virginia.
My name is Rob, and my mother's name is Rita.
My name is Clark, and my mother's name was Frances.
My name is Greg, and my mother's name is Susan.
I'm Jack. My mother's name was May Bernice.
My name is Ed. My mother's name is Nancy.
My name is Ray. My mother's name is Mary.
My name is Larry. My mother's name is Harriet.
My name is Jim. My mother's name is Rachel.
I'm Douglas, and my mother's name was Claire.
My name is Clint. My mother's name was Virginia.
My name is Doug. My mother's name was Eva.
My name is Cage, and my mother's name is Marie Louise.
My name is Lee, and my mother's name is Shirley.
My name is David, and my mother's name is Phyllis.
My name is David, and my mother's name was Caroline.
My name is David Randall, and my mother's name is Mary Elizabeth.
My name is Richard, and my mother's name was Dolores.
My name is Jerry, and my mother's name was Janet.
My name is Roy, and my mother's name is Victoria.
My name is Harley. My mother's name was Helen.
I'm Jim, and my mother's name is Charlotte.
My name is Don.
I'm George. My mother's name was Ella.
My name is Jim. My mother's name is Ronald.
My name is Michael. My mother's name is Annette.
My name is Michael, and my mother's name is Delora.
And my name is Chris, and my mother's name is Linda. Did we miss anyone?
Okay.
Well, with that, let me introduce very quickly Bill Weber, who most of you know. He's been a long-time GBFer. He is he's been through the dedicated practitioner program at Spirit Rock. He's also been a documentary filmmaker for many years, and he also suggested I call him just an old Buddhist. So with that, I'll leave it to Bill Weber.
I thank you all for the chance to hear some others' names. And I encourage everybody to pay attention to what reaction you had, saying your own mother's name and hearing other people's mother's names. And for me, I noticed a very strong reaction to people that no longer have their mothers so directly. And that is something that I haven't gone through yet myself. And so I have no idea what that's like to lose your mother. But my mother being 82, I will find out probably in the not too distant future, if I continue to make it longer than she does. When I was asked to speak on Mother's Day, it just sort of became clear to me that I'd like to talk about my mothers, and also I think as gay men we have a particular affinity to our mothers. I mean, I know I do, and maybe it's a cliche, maybe it's a overgeneralization, which I'm sure it is to some degree, but I think a lot of us have very strong connections, both positive and negative, maybe more one direction or the other, with our mothers. And I think, again, I speak for myself, I see a lot of my mother in me and feel it and deal with it all the time. And I think it's something that maybe a lot of us can relate to in some manner. Because also when I think about what it is I have to offer a group like this, I also sort of reflect on, well, what's really central in my own practice, what's really central that I'm working with, that this practice and the Buddhist teachings really help me in my life. And I just turned 56 recently, and it seems like a big issue for me lately has been, how do I live with me? I mean, it's been for 56 years, it's how do I live with me? And it continues to be, but it's really central again. And so it's not only living with me, it's also living with my mother. Because there's a lot of her in me. And again, I encourage you all to, when I talk, is to maybe reflect back on how this relates to you. And I know it can be a very emotional issue. I've had friends that have had, just unbelievable mothers. I mean, they say, this one good friend of mine, she says when she thinks of her mother, she thinks of Hitler, basically. I am very blessed that my mother is actually, she's been wonderful. And she's given me many great gifts. And I think that one reason I am up here speaking, and that I put myself in roles and positions where I actually put myself out there and say, I'm up here in the front of the room talking. This is Pat Ann. A lot of this comes from Pat Ann. My mother is a very social person. She puts herself out there a lot. 8 or 9 years ago, I made a documentary film on the Cockettes that premiered at the Castro. And my parents, who live in Kansas, came out for that. And it was the first time my parents were in the Castro Theater, and I introduced them from the stage before the film started. My mom got up in the chair and started waving to everybody. I'm serious. But the really cool thing was she got a standing ovation. So, I'm lucky in that way. And my mother's a very social person. She's a very happy person. I mean, I don't know I wouldn't call her happy, but she likes to be happy. She likes to have fun. She likes to be social. She has a great sense of humor. She loves to laugh. And I carry all this in part through my mother. I don't want to say that everything I'm talking about, that I'm, this cookie cutter of my mom, or that most of what I have is directly to her, but I really attribute a lot of what I see that I didn't choose, but that I see that it's coming from my mother. She also gave me some things that have been real challenges. When I was growing up, I had 2 younger brothers, but it was mainly my older sister and I and my parents that I used to come home from school, and we were the family that had dinner together every night. And I used to say there was only one cross in the house, and it was a fight between my sister and my mother and my dad and I who got on the cross every night. And my mother almost always won. She was the best martyr I've about ever known. She was highly skilled at it. And by martyr, I mean, somebody that can take a situation where it's like, oh, look at me, I suffer, and the suffering you have caused me. And you can play that. You can play that really well. That I am highly skilled at. And I learned a lot from my mother. The first night I came out to my parents, I was still in high school, and I hadn't come out to anybody yet. And it was basically my ploy to get on the cross one night at the dinner table. I'm dead serious. I mean, my mother was going off about something, and it was like, you think you have it bad. I'm in love with my best friend, Richie Lindemann. And boy, the cross was mine. I remember that night so well, and they cried, and but when you get that too, you can play it, and it's all of a sudden it becomes about you, and you can play it, and people are like, oh, let me help you. What can we do? People are like subservient to you. It's a tricky thing, but you can believe me. I know. I'm highly skilled martyr, highly skilled. And I used this martyrdom on my friend Richie Lindemann all through high school. That's where I really practiced it, because I was in love with my best friend. This went on all through high school, and we were actually roommates together the first year in a college dorm. And he was straight. He died a long time ago. He had a pretty bad coke habit and a family with weak hearts, and he died at 30, but he was quite straight, but I actually kept him from having a girlfriend for years. I'm serious. I was his best friend, and I would play this hurt role and this, oh, you have to pay attention to me role, to the point where I think on both of our high school prom nights, we were out getting stoned in a car or something. I mean, I kept him from literally having girlfriends with my ability to play the martyr sometimes. It works well, but it doesn't feel so good, and it's not too healthy, and you don't really build healthy relationships, I mean, do I even really sort of need to say that? So part of what I'm trying to get at here is that, we come into this world, we're born into this world, from our, moms, but we have all kinds of influences, and our parents being certainly a big one, but we have the influences of where we're born and the time we're born in and the race we're born into and the class we're born into and all of that. That all influences who we are, that we really have no choice over, but that we carry with us. And it's part of what, when I say I'm 56 years, I've been trying to learn how to live with myself. It's learning how to live with all the things that I was born into, that we're all born into, that we really have very little choice over. But hopefully we can learn skilled ways, healthy ways to deal with it, and ways that lead to some sort of happiness, contentment, not so much suffering. Chris mentioned I was in this training group at Spirit Rock, and the group I was in, it was called Community Dharma Leaders, and we were dealing a lot with cultural diversity at the time. Larry Yang, who's I know has spoken here a number of times, was in that group, and Larry was one of the folks who sort of really spearheaded the fact that Spirit Rock is basically it's being the upper middle path. It's basically a white group, but Larry and quite a few other people really tried to bring in. We have to look at all of our cultural diversity and all of what what we bring to it. And so one night we were supposed to read something or talk to people about our own cultural background, or what what we're born into. So I wrote a little something about my own cultural background. And for me, my cultural background is family, it's place, it's sexuality, and it's the time that I've been born into. So let me try to read this. A long line of lines converge, merge, dissolve. My family's connection with this country goes back hundreds of years. On my father's side, I'm a many times great-grandson of Presidents John Adams and John Quincy Adams, signers of the Declaration of Independence. My mother's side includes French Huguenots who ventured here in the early 1700s. My grandparents are buried next to these ancestors along the Hudson River in upstate New York. So my cultural heritage has these lines to early America, this mix of British, Irish, Dutch, French. Maybe my sense of adventure, my strong work ethic, my quest for freedom. Maybe, too, my sense of entitlement, an inherent racism, an overly competitive spirit, the full flag of my American heritage. A long line of lines converge, merge, dissolve. I was raised in the Midwest, vast expanses of land and sky, generally polite, caring, courteous, gracious, truly gracious, avoiding conflict, let's be nice, the gift of simple, the gift of neighborly, the fear of numbness, the fear of isolation, the fear of the unknown, the fear of the unfamiliar. I ran to New York City by 23, losing myself in the canyons, a vampire, a hungry ghost, the nocturnal culture of the dark night, the city that never sleeps when you're on poker speed. A long line of lines converge, merge, dissolve. I belong to that endless succession of sissy boys, sensitive, perceptive, a little loose in this male body, the love of drama, the placement of a line, the gift of embodying a taste of both the masculine and the feminine, the many blessings that come with not being in the mainstream, and those early depths of shame, of guilt, a lost, forgotten, and not reported culture, newly marketable, highly visible. I find I rest in the home I call the counterculture. I am he as you are me, and we are all together. The search for truth, the quest for peace, the questioning of the apparent greedy authority. The zigzag zen of the Nevada desert, dancing with the ego under an exploding sky. The queer beat Dharma of Ginsberg, the trickster clowns, Kesey and Gravy. Talking about my cultural generation. A long line of lines converge, merge, dissolve. I find that I take my experience and my cultural heritage, which colors my experience, to be true. And I believe it a lot of times. I believe it most of the time. And I still believe it to some point. But I also have to, I think it's really important to remember and to remind myself that all of these influences I just read about really color the way I see the world. The fact that I was raised upper middle class, that I am Midwestern, that I am white, that I was born in the 1950s in America. It all completely colors, like the mothers that we have, you know, that birthed us or whatever. How do I live? And how do I live with that? You know, that's what I'm saying. This has sort of been my quest. How do I live with Bill Weber? Right now, I'm a third of the way through teaching a beginning meditation class with a group at the Unitarian Church. And one thing I really like about teaching beginning classes, it really gets me back to some of the really simple, basic teachings of the Buddha. And it also gets me back to the simple sincerity of people coming in just wanting to wake up and wanting to see clearly. And one thing I really try to emphasize when I'm teaching is that when you're sitting there trying to pay attention to the breath, the best thing you can do is to be with whatever it is without wanting it to be different than what it is. which is really sort of the core of what the Buddhist teachings are about. It's coming into alignment the way things are, not with the way we want things to be. And Lord knows I spent 56 years trying to get rid of a lot of my mother, but I'm learning one of the best ways to really deal with that is to just be in alignment with it and just to see, yeah, it's there. I recognize it. I see it. So, again, this is getting back to the core of the teachings of like beginning meditation is this recognition to see it clearly. And again, talking about the simplicity of the Buddha's teachings, I'm sure you've all heard about the Buddha on the night of the Enlightenment. He's sitting under the Bodhi tree, and he's visited by Mara. Mara being temptation, Mara being, all of the greed, and all of the temptation, and all the. I'll just leave it at temptation. And all the Buddha does is say, Mara, I see you. And it's a really simple teaching. It's a fairy tale teaching, but the more I practice and the more I understand and the more it sort of seeps into my own life, it's about all there. It's about just in this very simple act of seeing clearly. There's the possibility for that alignment. There's a possibility for that conflict that we have, or the conflict that's created when we are not accepting of what is actually current, alive for us. That conflict goes away, and there can be a peace, a contentment that can arise right in the midst of all that. Just in that simple act of, I see it. Mara, I see you. So it's like, Mother, I see you. And that does happen sometimes when my martyrdom comes up. It's like, and I even use that sometimes. It's like, Mother, I see you. It can be a really helpful tool, this simple act of recognition. So, let's say, we have clarity of mind. We see these things when they arise. The next level that we can put on top of that is some sort of acceptance, some sort of surrender to that when it does arise. It is that freedom from that conflict of being at odds with the way things are. I felt it when we were just sitting up here. That's why I love meditation practice so much. It all gives us the opportunity to stop and pay attention and just to see, okay, this is what's going on, and to see if we are at odds or in conflict or in denial or lusting after it to be different than what it is. We can sit there and experience it, and we can also sit there and sort of say, what does it feel like if I just release into it, let go into it in some way? I'm going to keep coming back to this martyrdom because it's probably one of the key issues that I've been dealing with that I do see from my mother. And I do watch it arise sometimes, and I can see it very clearly, but I allow myself to get caught in it sometimes, and partially because it feels good sometimes, and I get nice results from it sometimes. And to me, I almost feel like it's fishing almost. I got something on the hook, and I can just reel it in. But there's a certain level of consciousness and wakefulness in the midst of all that. But what also is available with this clarity of mind and this clear seeing and some level of acceptance is the ability to respond differently. I don't have to fall into it. Even though it's there, even though it's part of me, even though it has arisen, I don't necessarily have to act out on it. There's a woman who's spoken here before, Pamela Weiss, who really reminds me and reminds a lot of people about the opportunity to appropriate response. I think it was Zen Master Dogen in the 13th century said, he was asked, what's the purpose of a lifetime of practice? And he said, and his response was appropriate response. I think Pam's website is appropriateresponse.com. But it's a great thing to think about, because we really don't have to change what our mother is in us or whatever our cultural influences are in us. But if we can see them, we can just respond appropriately. We don't have to be enslaved by them or act irresponsibly because of these things that we're given that we really didn't ask for, but we just have. But we have the opportunity to really respond appropriately. So I see the mortar come up. It's like, okay, there's that again. I don't have to act on it. I don't have to, be a jerk for a while and just to get myself a couple of moments of enjoyment or something. Now, another way that I emphasize in teaching beginning class again, and that can be really helpful for me in learning how to live with Bill Weber and live with my mother, is to take it out of my head a little bit and take it in my body. Another thing I love about this practice is the way to respond to things somatically, to feel them in the body. And the body is this wonderful gift of a tool that really is a barometer, I guess you might call it, or something. It'll do a number of things. One thing, it again takes you out of our thoughts around what's going on. And a lot of us can spin stories for days and days about what's going on. And it takes us into the direct and very alive experience of what's going on. So something arises. Where is it in the body? What does it feel like? Where does it move? What kind of energy does it have? Is it big? Is it small? Is it heavy? Is it light? It can tell us a lot. Do we feel contracted, or is there some sort of expansion around us? It allows a more healthy, if I dare say, appropriate response to arise sometimes. And it's another way to really sort of investigate what it is that we're experiencing. And it brings us back into the moment, which to me is sort of the gist of all this practice anyway. Can we live our lives now instead of being lost in the past or stuck, worrying about or planning for the future? The last part of sort of how I deal with this and the skills I'm continuing to learn on how to be in a good relationship with what I've been given, with my cultural heritage, with the gifts and the trials from my mother, is to watch how I identify with it, to watch how I identify with any of it. And, I'm sure you've all heard that this is a practice of non-self. And that can be sort of a tricky thing to investigate and a tricky thing to wrap our busy minds around sometimes, because, I certainly feel a self. I have a lot of Bill Weber identity, and I'm sure we all have, a healthy dose and probably an unhealthy dose of identity. But one way I look now at the sense of non-self is that I come back to what the Buddha was like on the night of the Enlightenment when he said, I see you. Because when my martyrdom arises, there it is. It's right there. But there's also that part of me that can see it. And to me, I sort of go to, who is it that sees that? Who is it that's not the martyr that sees the martyr arise? And when you think about it, I'm sure you've all probably experienced at some point, oh my God, I'm acting like my mother. Who is it that sees that is not your mother, and that is really, in some ways, not even you? It's just this ability to be aware, to be awake, and to see, that's not clouded, that's not soiled, or that's sort of unmoved by all the other things that go around. This, to me, is sort of the way I connect with this sense of non-self. I also use this a lot when I get sick. I find that when I, get the flu or something, it can be a great time to say, there's a part of me that really feels terrible, and yet there's a part of me that can observe that isn't sick, that doesn't feel this flu or this cold or whatever. To me, that is what the Buddha connected with on the night of the Enlightenment. that when all these temptations came to him, he was unmoved. And it was like, oh, I see you. That's the path to freedom. That's the path to some sort of happiness and contentment. So I invite you all to maybe play with that a bit. To when you sit, when you see your mother arising in you, whatever it is, when you have these moments of clarity and these moments of awareness, who is that? Who is that sees us, that has this knowledge, this knowing? It can be an interesting thing to work with. And I want to come back to my mom just a little bit, and then I want to open this up for discussion. I told my husband that I was doing this, and he says, "Oh, you're going to get up there and talk about what a bitch your mom was?" My mom had she had a good life, but she was born in a different time and place. When she was young, she was very much a tomboy. She was the only child, and she loved playing with boys. She loved sports. And I always think, there's a good part of me that thinks if my mom was born in this time or in 20, 30 years later, she very easily could have been a dyke or, a lesbian or whatever. It wasn't an option for her so much back then. She also had a very domineering mother who I was completely in love with. So she also had to deal with her son, probably being fairly obvious about his affections for his grandmother being greater than the affections he had for her or that he showed. She also was a woman who had tremendous, she loved literature, she loved theater, she loved dance, she loved good food, and yet when she was probably 30 years old, my father moved her to a small town in the Midwest to raise 4 kids, where there was none of that, or extremely little of that. She wasn't happy. Most of my memories of my mom when I was growing up, through grade school, through high school, was a very unhappy woman. She, in high school, this is in the mid-60s, she started to gain a lot of weight, a lot through her unhappiness. And back then, their prescription for weight loss was speed, basically. And I know because I used to get into her medicine cabinet and take speed before I went to high school. And in the morning, my mom would just be like buzzing around the kitchen and singing and stuff. And by the nighttime, it was like, look out, because she was coming down. So these are a lot of my memories. And so she had it rough. And it was a lot because of the time and place and her circumstances that she didn't have much control over. My mom was a Christian, and she loves the church now. I think she would much prefer if I was following Jesus as opposed to listening to what the Buddha has to say. She had a harder time almost with me coming out as a Buddhist than with me coming out as a homosexual. But the way I look at it, what her religion offered her, I don't see as always being so healthy. There's a lot of guilt, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of sin. She wasn't given a lot of tools to deal with this in some ways. She wasn't born in a time when it was easy to talk about things so much either. My parents, when they met in college, they met through their 2 best friends that they had through grade school. And their 2 best friends got married, and my parents got married. And they were best friends through life. And yet both their best friends died. He died of a heart attack, and she died of a really sort of ugly cancer. And I talked to my parents about that. And I realized they had no way of processing that. They had no way of really talking to each other about that, talking to their kids about that, talking to their friends about that. And to me, it was just like really sad, Your best friend of like 60 years dies a horrible cancer death, and you have no way of processing that in your culture, in the culture that you've been brought into. And right now, they're in their 80s. They've lost so many of their friends, and a bunch of their other friends are all going through Alzheimer's and stuff. And thank God my parents aren't dealing with that. According to Alzheimer's, 50% of us in this room right now have family that are dealing with that right now. It's pretty widespread. Again, they don't have that container that we're given, that we're thankfully given, to maybe reflect and to learn skills and to process and to take it into our body and to bow to it and all of that. So I bring that up now in part to say thank you to my mother and to show and to arouse the compassion in myself, to remind myself of that, to let the compassion arise so that I can feel that towards my mother. And also as a reminder that when things arise in my own self that I struggle with, to use that compassion for myself, because we all are born in a time where we're given tremendous gifts, but we also have things that are challenges, that maybe we don't have the right containers to deal with some of this stuff, that there are very serious challenges, and especially, I mean, I don't know about you, but the last couple of years I've been finding myself getting very depressed about the state of the world. It doesn't seem so great to me, and I carry it around a lot. But again, to allow this to allow compassion to arise, so that we don't have to be harsh on ourselves or others, so that we can have some understanding, that the heart can open and hold this in some way, and certainly hold ourselves, because that to me is one of the greatest tools of the way for me to hold what I've been given that is challenging, and that's to do it with as much love and kindness and non-judgment as possible. So I have no idea what time it is, but I hope there's time for...
We have about 10 to 12 minutes for questions.
I'm sorry I talked so long, because I'd love to open it up for anything you want to say. And you want to bring your mother into it if you want to talk about what it was like to say her name or whatever.
I'm David, and my mother was Caroline. That's a very southern name. Also French Huguenot English. Pretty much the same thing, only we sort of moved south. We got away from Maryland and joined the Confederacy. Stayed around Atlanta with a Confederate general in our background, which we never got over. I remember when she died also of cancer, and dying on Christmas morning, 1988, with me in the throes of my addictions of alcoholism. I held her hand and experienced her actually leaving her body. I had only vague ideas of Buddha at that time, and lately I've come more experience with that through Roger Corliss, who is a good friend, and working on some of his work. As an aside right now, when we did a dissolution of his estate, we gave a scroll that was given to him, to someone in this group, and if that person would come to me, I brought the story I promised them that he wrote as a narrative about that. I really appreciate you speaking of mothers today. I kind of was putting that away. Caught into a Tara's birthday party this afternoon, and I'm feeling very, into the horoscope, into the other bulls in my life. So I guess right now I'm appreciative for you bringing this up and reminding me of my mother. She was schizophrenic her whole life. I was her guardian for 30 years, and she pretty much, ruled my life. So many of the things that you speak of as that generation were identical or were similar, except with a southern flavor. And I think all of us have those things. It's hard to appreciate. Like in the South, we never forget ancestry. We're somewhat Chinese that way. We sit on the porch and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, you just reminded me too. Something I wanted to bring up was just that, our mothers, I think, generally did the best they could. Yeah. Please.
I was thinking about my mom a lot recently because she Actually, your mom reminded me a lot of her. She was very vivacious and told all these funny stories. And I don't think we're having played. Having played the martyr a lot, I have somewhat of a strong reaction when you said that. I don't know what your mom was like if she did actually play the martyr, but my sense of my mom is that she actually did suffer a lot. And in terms of a lot of the Buddhist teachings, I was at the Dedicated Practitioners program for a long time, and we had a lot of emphasis on mindfulness and different kinds of mindfulness and mindfulness of the body and such. And certainly a lot of people were very used a lot of language of acceptance. And recently, as I've been reading more about Buddhism and studying it more, I've turned away from that because I think the Eightfold Path actually doesn't mention acceptance at all. That's not one of the 8 paths. They're actually quite action oriented.
Right.
And the appropriate response. My mom had very severe depression much of her life, and eventually I tried to intervene. It was a little bit helpful, and then she got pneumonia and died. And my sister had a lot of her personality with the depression and the sort of wrathfulness or anger that my dad had. And rather than accepting it, I made a decision a while ago that I tried to persuade her to get some help, and it took a long time to persuade her, culminating last week in going with her to a psychiatrist. And I very much wanted her to go to see a therapist to deal with her as childhood abuse, and she didn't want to. And I was pretty manipulative in finding a psychiatrist who I knew would tell her to do that, but tell her in such a way that she would hear. And she ended up doing that. Now she's feeling much better, and she took some different medication. And I say this because I think that a lot of the spirit rock upper middle way, for whatever reason it is, and I think they're just historic reasons, that the people who brought Buddhism from in the 70s from Burma and Thailand to the US, they were just, their teachers were Mahasi Sayadaw, these people who were very, very into a quite narrow aspect of Buddhism, a quite narrow and recent aspect of acceptance and mindfulness would set us free. That is not Buddhism. Those are not the words of the Buddha. And many times I think just accepting things is quite dangerous. Quite dangerous. And so I sort of just say this as it's a little cautionary note of that.
How so?
Framework. Sorry?
How so?
Well, I think, to use an example of my sister and my mom, and I think that it would have been very easy for me to accept, this is the way that my sister is.
Right.
My sister is an angry person. She will always be an angry person. That is her nature. That is her karma. I accept this. I will not intervene. And it plays into a kind of 12-step ideology of, let me not deal with someone else's business, which, again, I just have a lot of hostility towards that. I think that just lets people suffer. And that had I accepted things, my sister very well would have gone down a quite different path of not having her depression treated. The episodes would have gotten worse. She would have become very depressed. She died younger, been unhappy for decades. Maybe something else would have broken that. But that's just one example of how that works. And I'm very skeptical of the acceptance language.
But you also you bring in a passivity almost with acceptance, which I don't think necessarily has to be there. I'm sorry?
Say more.
I've been getting this question a lot. I mean, I've been teaching this beginning class. A lot of the students are saying, well, if I let go, am I just not going to care anymore? Will I not have emotions? All of this stuff. And to me, it's like, well, good luck in letting go to that level of degree at this, at any point. But I think with a certain level of acceptance, the appropriate response is oftentimes great action. And that's where right effort can really start to come into play. Like you exhibited with your mom that I'm hearing. And you were skilled that, okay, I'm going to find somebody that can really help direct her because she's not going to listen to me, but I'll find somebody who can. So, the first thing you had to do, though, is accept the fact that your mom had this problem. And if you were denying it, it probably wouldn't have happened.
You know, let me stop. Let me say, I now remember why I find this, part of the reason why I find this so strong is that my mom's psychiatrist said to me, when I kept asking him about other treatments, she was in Florida, had a pretty good psychiatrist there. And I'm just going to say this because I think a lot of people are going to be dealing with the same situation. He said, you have to accept that your mom has dementia and she will never get better.
Right.
If I had listened to him, my mom would have suffered tremendously. And I later wrote an article about this, that between 2 and 10% of women, depending on what study you read, are diagnosed with dementia, when in fact they have reversible depression.
Right.
And so he used those exact words, as many of people in this room, I'm sure, have heard people say, you just have to accept that your mother or father will never get better, they have dementia. And so it was, I accept what you're saying, that many times the first step is acceptance and then right action.
Right.
To quote Martin Luther King, the problem with tokenism is not that it's a first step, it's that it's a last step.
Right.
And that for many people, the language of acceptance is heard, and I think is understood by the people who say it as the last step.
Right, right. No, and I completely appreciate what you're saying, and it can be a very tricky area. I mean, a lot of times too, I see it as an alignment. We really have to come into align the way things are, and then and maybe we don't have to accept it, but to really be careful about when we're adding layers of suffering onto what it is that we aren't accepting, I think is or that we aren't coming into alignment with, can be helpful.
One more question.
Oh.
Yeah, Bill, thank you as usual. This is your standard wounds sharing. Thank you very much. I'm just thinking, I just talked to my mother yesterday, I'm going to see her on Thursday, and I come from a family of very strong, basically terrific women, but who all have a capacity for ferocity. And as a boy, it was completely mysterious to me. Just out of the blue would come this emotional blade. And it made, I believe, a young lesson I made was that, gee, these females are unbelievable. There was no mention about menstrual pain, and which I've now since found out that all the women in my family are crucified every month and have been their whole lives by menstrual pain.
Right.
And so basically lovely women who one morning they were just a heartbeat from hell. And what did you do? Where did this come from? And then it would go away.
Right.
I don't know if anyone else experienced, but my father's stability, I think, seemed to be more appealing to relate to because of that. And it seems like a tragic misunderstanding. And I have great compassion. If I have the slightest symptom, I'm unhappy. And so they drag around this acute cramping for weeks at a time, and I had no idea.
Right.
But it definitely impacted my sense of what I wanted to be around.
Well, I think that has to be our stopping point for now. So let's see. Thank you, Bill. I'd like to thank Bill and everyone. And now it's usually time for announcements, if there are any announcements people have. Yes.
Okay, starting with Community Thrift Store, we received a check for $284 from the last quarter, so please continue to donate. They're at 623 Valencia Street. They take donations every day between 10 and 5, and they're suggesting that you contact them first and tell them what you want to bring so you don't schlep in vain. We received a thank you letter from the Buddhist Peace Fellowship for a $500 donation from the Sangha. All these I'm going to leave out there so you can take a look at. And we've also received an issue of Turning Wheel. It's their big sex issues, very interesting articles in here. I just haven't had a chance to read all of them, but that will be out there also, so take a look at.
The big sex issue?
Awareness and sexual engagement.
Has a fold out.
Where's that?
Other announcements?
Yes, good morning. I'm Kei Matsuda. I'm the host this morning, and I wonder if anybody's here for the first time, second time, or after a long absence? No? Okay, well then just go through the regular announcement from the host, and we have refreshment, we have some cookies, so please enjoy them during the social hour, and also help yourself to tea. If you have used teacups, please wash them and put them away on the dry mat. We also have a sign-up sheet for newcomers, so if you like to receive our newsletter or stay in touch with our group, please put your name and address down on the sheet which is next to our Dharma ball on the credenza. And third, there often is a group of people who go out to have lunch after the meeting, and then the group usually meet around 12:30 around the front door. So if you are interested in going, look for the group. And finally, I'll be coming around with a Dharma ball, and suggested donation is $5 to $8 to keep this group going. But we're happy to accept any amount over that suggested amount. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. And I'd like to interject also, so we almost don't have to say this, but please everyone help our newcomer feel welcome. If you want to speak to anyone, I'm sure they'd love to make you answer any questions or get you started. Other announcements?
Yeah, it's just I was up Mount 10 yesterday, and if you guys like wildflowers, this is the height of the wildflower season right now, so I heartily recommend visiting up there.
I don't know if any of you heard this week on Ira Glass's This American Life, they had a long program, and Dan Savage, who writes this sex column, gave an unbelievably moving talk about his mother.
It's fantastic.
It was breathtaking.
Where was that? NPR.
NPR on what's it?
This American
Life, and you can
podcast.
Get a podcast. Don't miss it. It just was one of the best things I've ever heard.
Any other announcements? Okay, well, now we'll stand and go over the
whole party. It's just a party, right? Yeah.
Whatever merit from our good intentions, from our desires for wisdom, for freedom, for happiness, may we share those merits with everybody. And today may we especially share them with the mothers of the world, with our own mothers, our families, all the women that continue this life. May they especially be free. May they especially be happy. May they especially know contentment. May we share this merit with them and with all beings. May all beings be free.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.